VR&E, Veteran Readiness and Employment, which is Chapter 31. This is actually not considered an education benefit, which is strange because it can pay for education, but it's an employment program. So this very much differs in terms of entitlement criteria, and even while you're in the program, it will look different. It is only for vets that have a service-connected disability. You have to be at least 10% to even apply. But there's a second layer of entitlement. So to apply, you have to be service connected, but then they're looking at, are you eligible for our services? And what they're looking at there is, what are you service connected for? Specifically, what's the percentage? What are the different things that are and how does it affect you? So the example that I like to give, which is very basic, just to give you an idea of, two bookends, you could have someone that is 90% service connected, which is a very high disability rating, for maybe a multitude of issues, including like multiple sclerosis, anxiety, back injury, like all these different things. But if that person has a master's degree, let's say a master's degree in accounting, and they have a really good job making a good salary, and none of their disabilities are negatively impacted by that work, meaning they don't have trouble at work, they're not unable to do some of the duties, that person would not be eligible for VR&E services because there's no barrier to employment. They have qualified education, they have a good job, and none of the job duties are aggravating their disability. So although on paper they're 90% and it looks like, well, of course they'd be entitled, they wouldn't be. Now, if down the road something happened and they could no longer sit for long periods, or they couldn't do the job duties because of an exacerbation in their symptoms, then they may qualify for some VR&E services. On the other end of the spectrum, you could have a vet who comes in at 10%, which is very low, and they might think, oh, I'll never be eligible for VR&E. But let's say it's 10% for a knee injury, and they have a GED and they're working as a roofer. They would actually be entitled because they shouldn't be doing that roofing work because of the knee injury. It's going to be aggravated, right? And they only have a GED, so they have limited education. Chances are they're not going to be able to find a job much better, right? So they would go to VR&E for some retraining to be able to get out of that line of work and get past the limitations of their disability. Now, most vets are going to fall somewhere in the middle with like 30, 40, 50, 60%, maybe a combination of physical injuries and mental health stuff. But VR&E is looking very specifically at each individual veteran. And they're saying, okay, what's your level of education? How much schooling do you have? Where have you worked? Where do you currently work? How do your disabilities impact you in daily living and in the workplace? And so they're looking at that complete picture to say, okay, you meet the criteria, you need our services in order to be gainfully employed in a career. So that's as easy as I can explain VR&E, because it's a bit of a more complicated program, a wonderful program, but there's definitely some layers of entitlement with VR&E. Some benefits of VR&E once you're in is that it's full coverage. So it's full tuition and fees, whether you're at a state school or a private school. It's 48 months of benefits right out of the gates, not 36. And then it also, if let's say you are a veteran who was post 9/11 GI Bill 60% entitled, so you're getting the 60% payment rate. As soon as you change over to VR&E, you automatically get the 100% payment rate for the BAH. So now you're maximizing the benefits in a different way. And they pay all of your books and supplies directly to the bookstore. So it's not that stipend. $500 book stipend sounds great, but if you're a nursing student, you're probably spending close to $1,000 on books. VR&E would pay that in full straight to the bookstore. So it's a very comprehensive program because it is for the vets that are service connected. And all the while that you're in the program, you have a case manager. And then at the end of the program, they do job placement services because, again, it's an employment program. So their goal is to see you enter the workforce, re-enter the workforce at the end of your training. So there's a comprehensive set of services that are job development, job placement at the end of your degree. So this is kind of a flow chart with VR&E in terms of, initially being evaluated, then they determine if you're entitled. They also take a really close look at what job you want to pursue to see if it's an appropriate match in terms of labor market, are there jobs available, and also not further aggravating your disability. So they're not going to help you retrain in a job that would then, you won't be able to do it after a year because of your back injury or your PTSD. Some common questions that I get in terms of the benefits, especially with 33 and 31, can I use GI Bill and VOC-REHAB at the same time? And no, you can't do that. You have to pick one or the other. but you can, it is possible to go back and forth if you're unhappy with one or just don't like being in VR&E and want to go back to post 9/11. Um, can I get 36 months of GI Bill and then the additional 48 months under post VR&E? Also, no. You want to think of your name in the VA system, and the months are coming off of both at the same time. So let's say you use 10 months of post 9/11, and then you find out about VR&E and you say, oh, that's a great program. I think I'm going to change over. When you land in VR&E, they'll see 38 months because the 10 months would have been deducted from the months used under post 9/11 GI Bill. And then the other really common question that I get that I always like to dispel is some vets think that they should just use up the post 9/11 first, because why not? I have it and it's easy to set up, and then switch to voc rehab or VR&E for the additional 12 months because it's a total of 48. That is not a good idea. And the reason is, if you think back to the premise of VR&E is an employment program. So when you show up in VR&E, they're looking at level of education, employment history. If you show up in VR&E with a bachelor's degree in business management, let's say, from your GI Bill, you're now more employable than you were before you got that bachelor's degree. So they could say, you actually don't meet our criteria. You don't have any barriers to employment. You can go get a job with your bachelor's degree in business management. So it's actually better to look into changing over to VR&E earlier in the process versus waiting too long, if that makes sense.